Lookout establishment looking like Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are for real. We will look inside the numbers and explain why Hillary Clinton could have a real problem on her hands. Then we'll talk about how last night's results were the worst nightmare for the Republican brass. Trump and Cruz cruising in the GOP honchos definitely worrying. Then our panel of attorneys will join us. We're going to talk about the officer standing trial as we speak for killing an unarmed Akai Gurley in a Brooklyn stairwell. Was this a case of reasonable force or was it manslaughter? Good evening and welcome to RFL. I am Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we begin tonight with the Democrats and a resounding win by one Bernie Sanders. Now, he beat Hillary Clinton. That wasn't a surprise, but he beat her by more than 20 points in New Hampshire, obviously tapping into something very real, and it's looking like he himself is for real. Sanders running a very disciplined campaign and sticking strictly to a single message.
The greed, the recklessness, and the illegal behavior of Wall Street drove our economy to its knees. The American people bailed out Wall Street. Now it's Wall Street's time to help the middle class.
For her part, Hillary trying to shake off the big loss and focus on what lies ahead.
Here's what we're going to do. Now we take this campaign to the entire country. We're going to fight for every vote in every state. We're going to fight for real solutions that make a real difference in people's lives.
But Hillary could have a tough hill to climb. Andrew, he's just back from New Hampshire and he's boiling down the numbers for us and also looking at how they could burn Hillary or how maybe they may not. It's always dangerous to overreact, Andrew, to a single snapshot, and that's what New Hampshire is. But nonetheless, especially the exit polling, it paints a very complicated and a difficult picture for what we thought was going to be a coronation for Hillary.
Well, you know, Rich, when you look at the numbers, I haven't seen a lopsided result this much since, I mean, you go back to Reagan-Mondale in 1984 on election night. The totality of the percentage that Bernie Sanders defeated Hillary Clinton by among all of the groups that you could possibly imagine in New Hampshire. Sanders beat Hillary Clinton among women voters, among male voters, among white voters, among non-white voters, all of voters under age 65, voters at all education levels, voters with earnings under $200,000, voters who wanted experience, voters who wanted an outsider, voters who were angry at Washington, not angry at Washington, all went for Bernie Sanders. If I listed A to Z by last name, they would have all gone for Sanders as opposed to Hillary Clinton. That's the good news for Sanders, the bad news for Clinton. There is, however, something about New Hampshire that makes it something of an outlier. Take a look at this. The state is 93% white. The nation isn't. 68% liberal. The nation and the Democratic Party is not. 42% of voters in New Hampshire last night said they wanted a president who was more liberal than Barack Obama. You'll be hard-pressed to find that number the rest of the country. 40% of the people who voted for Bernie Sanders last night were independent voters. That's not going to happen in other states as well. And there are still some positive signs for Hillary Clinton as you look through the numbers, and here they are. And I had to dig deep to find these. She came in even, I mean, she lost 49 to 50, among registered Democrats in New Hampshire. Independents can't vote in most other primaries, and if they hadn't in New Hampshire, it would have been a much tighter race. She won by 25 points from voters who want to continue Barack Obama's policies. That may be something that she can play in the future races. And this one's kind of a stretch. She lost among voters who are worried about a terror attack against the United States. I can't imagine that that's a trend that's going to continue state after state. That's something that she can certainly offset against Bernie Sanders, who has almost no foreign policy or homeland security experience.
All right, a lot to unpack there, and to help us out, Andrew, let's bring in Dominic, of course. And Dominic had an interesting meeting we're going to get into later on in the program this morning at Sylvia's in Harlem. Bernie Sanders and Reverend Sharpton. If anybody thinks it was just a blip on the radar what happened in New Hampshire, think again. All right, guys, a few things for me. We're hearing, Dom, and it's never good news, potential campaign shakeup. A lot of this is Groundhog Day. Remember how 8 years ago it was, I'm not comparing Barack Obama and Bernie Sanders, but they couldn't figure it out and they thought that it was the staff, it was the wrong messaging, it wasn't the candidate, and it wasn't the opponent. Mm-hmm. I don't know. You know, that's a headache for one. The second thing is, guys, this week, I'm telling you folks at home, this week it's going to get worse before it gets better for Hillary. because there's transcripts of speeches that she gave to Wall Street firms before she was a candidate that are described as making her sound like a director for one of the Wall Street firms. If the message that Bernie Sanders successfully trumpeted is that, hey, you know what, I'm sick of the 1% getting all the breaks and you guys getting hammered out there, and it's working for them, those speeches aren't going to help. They're going to hurt Hillary. She's going to try and get him out of the way now, but it will not help matters here, trying to help her convince people that she feels their pain too. Which is more troubling for you? That it's a campaign right now that hasn't figured out what their message is, or that what's going to come out next is going to even paint her farther apart here from some of those younger voters that don't feel that they're with her?
Neither. Real problem what you just raised in terms of not connecting with younger voters, a generational gap. That's a problem for the Clinton campaign. Perhaps that's a problem that Bill Clinton possibly can solve for her, Richard. I understand the exit poll numbers, I understand the points that you're making, but I contend not so fast. Now, let's not write her obituary this fast. If this type of behavior happened after South Carolina, then I would say she's got a real problem. Read between the lines of what she said in her concession speech last night. What she basically said was, New Hampshire and Iowa is skewed, does not reflect America. Let's start the real race effective now. So she's going to take a pounding for the next week or so.
I'll pump the brakes in a little bit, but Andrew, you gave a lot of exit polls. Let me give you two more. Yeah. When it comes to experience, by 8-1, they're with her. But here are the two others. When they said who's more honest and trustworthy, 90-something% of the Democratic voters in New Hampshire, they went with Bernie Sanders, only 5% with her. And then second, this is the most damning number that I saw of all of them, cares about people like me. 80-something% went with Bernie Sanders and 17% with Hillary Clinton. At the end of the day, we're going to talk minorities in a second. We're going to talk about people that you didn't see when you were up in New Hampshire. But for the Joe Sixpack or the regular guy out there, or for the couple who's not working on a factory line but are having trouble making the tuition payments, struggling with the mortgage and everything else, if more than 80% of the people in New Hampshire say he cares more about me than she does, how did she get by that?
By explaining that she does care about people like you, maybe not as much as Bernie Sanders does, because
right when we're going to release these Wall Street transcripts.
When you're looking at lower income levels, when you're looking at lower education levels, when you start to bring minorities and minority voters into the mix, it's not about just I don't care. It's about Bernie Sanders is going to play better, not necessarily with the minority voters just yet, but the lower education, the lower income voters. Of course, Sanders is going to resonate better. Of course, he's going to be perceived as caring more about their issues and their needs. Look at the policies that he's prescribing. He's going for universal health care. He's going for free college tuition. He's got a lot of goodies that are in there for people who are in the demographic that would be seeking those goodies. She just has to show that she does care.
Or make him explain how the math works or doesn't work.
She's never going to be able to show that she cares more.
I think all three of us agree, whenever you're on the ground, when it's a primary day, a caucus, or certainly at a convention, you always get a different sense than it'll come through the TV. What stuck with you that you knew this was going to be a bad night for her early on yesterday and say, ooh, this may be more than just a Manchester problem?
You know what? It was Monday when we were doing the follow-up to the Bill Clinton speech about gender, and I started talking to voters around the areas that we were in. Nobody reacted positively to that. Female voters, male voters, older voters, younger voters, nobody reacted well. And I started,
don't tell me how to feel.
And
right?
I started thinking back to 2008. Hillary does not score points when she goes negative. When the Clinton campaign in 2008 went negative against Obama, it backfired on her in South Carolina. Now, and I'm not sure why the Clinton surrogates were going so negative on Bernie Sanders in New Hampshire, which looked like a lost cause when the week began, but voters reacted more negatively to that negative messaging again. She was 10 points or 12 points back in the last poll. She lost by 22 points.
Listen, Don.
She needs to get away from the negatives.
Even if I'm betting, forget about I'm betting with Andrew's money. If I'm betting my own money, I'm still betting Hillary wins. But this one boggles my mind. And we had on the set here Nita Lowey, congresswoman who's as close to Hillary as anybody is, both personally as friends, let alone she helped her clear the path to be senator in New York, for folks who remember. And they've remained especially tight. On and off camera, She cannot understand how the female vote broke before the election of even last night when the numbers came out, as much as they have for Bernie Sanders. And she was cheering on when she heard what Secretary Albright said, which is there's going to be a place in hell for those who don't support women, who don't support the female candidate here. Gloria Steinem said basically women were going to these rallies, these young women, just to pick up guys.
Unbelievable.
Beyond falling like a lead balloon, it made people mad. Dominic, 40 and under, 90% of women, Democrat women, voted for Bernie Sanders. I cannot remotely understand this, right?
It's easy to understand, Richard.
Oh, you wouldn't have picked. If I told you a month ago, 90% of women under 40 are going to vote for Bernie Sanders, you'd tell me what do you smoke?
What I would have said to you is that the results from Iowa and New Hampshire basically don't count. That's what I would have said. Richard, all it is momentum.
Why wouldn't a white folk in South Carolina, some 24-year-old young woman in South Carolina, feel any differently than somebody in New Hampshire and Iowa when they're saying the same thing? This is about populism. They're mad. They're angry at the Wall Streeters and the rest. Explain to me why in Nevada and in South Carolina they feel any different.
Because when you introduce Nevada, you're going to be talking about a sizable amount of Latinos. When you talk
I'm not getting there. I'm talking the young white.
Right. But what I'm saying, Richard, is the young Latinos. Those will change those numbers. I'm not saying that we're wrong, but I'm saying
pump the brakes.
Right. I'm saying wait a minute. The national media is lazy. They want to beat up on the Clintons. It's an easy storyline to say that she's in trouble. Is this 2008? If it's the same results after South Carolina, then yes, but pump the brakes. And remember, Bernie Sanders has not been vetted yet by the national media.
Okay.
Remember that.
Democrats in these two states are not as liberal as the Democrats in New Hampshire are. And the dividing line, it's not about women, it's about the age. She has to figure out a way to connect to the under 40 crowd of any background.
I just think it's tough. Now listen, this is two things in common. As different as Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump are, is that the establishment very scared after last night and that there was populism outrage. And it manifested itself in different ways. We're going to get into what happened on the Republican side last night and why many are saying that what went down last night was the worst case scenario for the GOP. We'll explain after this.